În vreme ce liderii europeni se pregătesc de mai puțină implicare a Statelor Unite pe continentul nostru, cei din Asia sunt mai degrabă obișnuiți să tot audă de mai multă atenție pe care le-o acordă America. Perspectiva în acea parte de lume este mai practică. Oamenii de acolo știu că planurile mari au nevoie de timp ca să devină reale. Când vorbește despre relația cu SUA, Indonezia dă exemplul jocului tradițional Gomoku, care este despre găsirea echilibrului între jucători. Primim toate detaliile despre ce înseamnă această perspectivă de la trimisul Jakartei la București. Sunt Cristina Cileacu, începe Pașaport diplomatic. Meidyatama Suryodiningrat, Ambassador of Indonesia in Romania, welcome to Diplomatic Passport.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Ambassador, we are noticing in Europe right now that the United States is shifting the focus from here to a new point, which is Asia. The United States wants to be more present in your part of the world and less here. How is Indonesia preparing for this new wave, let's say, of Americans coming more in Asia, considering the fact that your country has also quite a good relationship with China?
Well, I think you pointed a very pertinent aspect of international politics, but I think there's slightly a misnomer, in my opinion. First and foremost, you have to remember that the United States is very much and always has been a Pacific power. So it's actually closer to Asia and my part of the world than it is to Europe. However, historical events have often overtaken the realities on the ground. Now, I think with Southeast Asia, it is always going to be considered a competition between China and Indonesia. Nevertheless, as you know, we have in Southeast Asia what is called the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Since its formation in 1967, the key aspect about the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which is ASEAN for short, has been that there has effectively been no war in that region and between its members since the formation of the association. So that is one of the security ideas and the security concepts of which us in Southeast Asia try to be more inclusive in our politics, and I think one of the important aspects of maintaining that, the parameters, is what's called the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, which has been signed by about 40 or 50 countries, and I am very glad to say that Romania last year and hopefully this year or next year latest will cede and sign the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, which means that this region will not be a ground for international competition.
The interest of the United States will be, again, first in your part of the world. You also have a new president that was installed last year. Let's just say he has something in common with Donald Trump, because both of them political career fell down and then rise up again. How do you think this particular relation will move on, considering the interest of the United States in the region?
Well, the first thing that President Prabowo and Donald Trump has in common is they were both democratically elected by a majority of people.
That's clear, yeah.
Which is the basic foundation of any democratic government. The second thing I would say is that the United States has never gone, has never left, and has always been present. The same thing with China. It has always been there throughout our history. So it is not a case of increasing or decreasing. It has always been there and has always been the major challenge. I will give you a very simple example. Indonesia is a country which has no military alliances, which has no foreign military bases whatsoever. Our closest neighbor, Singapore, has very close alliances with one of the major powers. The Philippines has bases and alliances with the United States. So it is very much in Southeast Asia a balancing game. The way I would put it is that in Europe it seems to me, in my opinion, often very black and white. Us or them, NATO versus then the Warsaw Pact and so on. In Asia, it is about trying to balance everything in some sort of equilibrium so that people can live together. I think the best way to look at in terms of strategy is that in the West, I think you play chess. In Asia, we play Gomoku or Othello, which is not a matter of simple who wins or loses, but trying to find that right balance between the two.
But then again, in Europe, it's a matter of values. I should ask then, what are the values when it comes to these balances in Asia? Because we do see the world a little different.
Of course, of course. And those values actually stem and come from the national priorities and national values and cultures of that country. I must start with Indonesia, just to remind people that we are a country with the 4th largest population in the world. Our country spreads from London to Afghanistan, and we are comprised of hundreds and hundreds of ethnic groups. Hence, for us, the day-to-day life of the country is always about trying to find that balance. We are not a homogeneous society. Our motto, our national motto, is unity in diversity.
Like European Union?
In some ways, yes. I would not want to enter a debate on who's more diverse, but the challenges are there. Now, that has been the culture of Indonesia, and that is reflected in our principles of foreign policy, which is independent and active. Which means since 1945, we've always tried to maintain an independent, but yet active. ASEAN is a very good example again, where we've been able to maintain cohesion and unity. When you look at the 10 ASEAN countries, you have Indonesia, the world's 4th largest democracy in the world. And then you have another country, which is a socialist communist country. And then you have another country, which has never had an election throughout their history. But yet, we have been able to live together, trying to find an equilibrium, a balance, which you would not see in any other region in the world. Again, let me remind you, the 4th largest democracy living together with a socialist communist country, living together with a religious state, living with a country which has never had elections. We respect each other's differences, and I think that has been the key when you talk about Southeast Asia, when you talk about Indonesia, is trying to respect those differences and find that commonality. Because what we learned throughout the Cold War is conflict and war does nothing.
Definitely conflict and war does nothing. You said that the United States never left the region, and I fully agree, but now the entire focus of the United States will be on that region. Don't you think that will disrupt some of this balance?
It is the same question that I am often posed when I am in the United States. But their question would divert to, how are you going to deal with China? And I always say, look, the Americans probably discovered China about 200, 300 years ago. We've been living with China for thousands and thousands of years. In that same way, at the end, we're actually in the same vicinity and the region. And we have had these sort of periods before. If you remember, during the Obama period, it was very famous where there was a pivot
yeah.
to Asia.
But never really happened. Well, at some level, yeah.
As I said, I think each administration at the end of the day, each era will have its new headlines and new highlights. But the most important thing for Asia, and I would like to underline this, is that what we do in that region should be primarily what those countries in the regions decide and determine. We should not let countries who are afar determine what's happening in our own backyard. And that is actually the very same doctrine that the Americans use. So the essence about Southeast Asia and Indonesia is that everyone is invited, it is inclusive, but don't have a fight in our backyard. That's the most important thing, and that's sort of the structure of the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation within the Association of Southeast Asian Nations.
Since you mentioned that Indonesia is the fourth largest democracy in the world, your country does have almost 280 million inhabitants and a very diverse one. Explain to the Romanian public, because for us it's again unusual from this part of the world, how the power is shifting, because we look now at the president. He had a lunch with the former president one day before elections. The son of the former president is your vice president. How is this working? Is the power in Indonesia, although you do have elections, held by a specific elite?
I think there will always be suspicions of elitism within politics. But I think in politics, often it is very much also popularity has something to do with that. I don't think that relatives who go into politics is unique to Indonesia. You see that everywhere in the world. The United States had two presidents who were father and son, in fact. But for a country like Indonesia, which is so open in many ways, in terms of its media, in terms of its expression, I think the elitism that may have been there previously in decades and decades before has been thoroughly, I would say, diminished and decreasing. You also have to remember that we came from a similar background as Romania. Your revolution was in 1988, 89. Ours was in 98. So Romania actually started a decade before us. We had 32 years of autocratic rule. Hence, I think for the first 10 to 15 years, it was about consolidating our democracy. I don't think now, it has been effectively 1.5 to 2 generations of Indonesians, you would ever see Indonesia harking back to the days of old. So our democracy really has matured. Our system is as vibrant and as solid and as strong as ever. And I think it will go again, evolve with the times that how democracy evolves in itself. So I don't think there's anything unique or different or odd about the state of Indonesian democracy. But I think the most important thing and the most important gauge for all of this is the fact of not the actual electoral process itself. Before, during, and immediately after, yes, there was a whole lot of controversies. But the success of any democracy and any electoral process, in my opinion, is to look what happens next. And if you look at what happened next, there is no controversy. The politicians move on, the people accept the results, it went to the courts, and as you see now, today, this very second, Indonesia is as stable as ever.
Last elections you had also make Indonesia to be part of a new process that again is not particular to your country, but let's just say it's much more obvious in your country. I'm talking about influencers that become members of your parliament. So you have over 20, if I'm not mistaken, people that used to, I don't know, be famous online and now they are politicians. In your opinion, is it possible, like a country, and especially a big one like Indonesia, to be able to be run by people with not so much experience, almost zero in politics?
Yes, I think you always need a bit of new blood in politics. If you have the same people over and over and over again, or just the same regular type of people, politics would not change. Hence, I think the advent and introduction of people from various backgrounds can be a positive, it can have a positive impact. But I would also say no one has experience in politics until they go into politics. No one has a CV, oh, I was former president. No, I think this is one of those unique jobs where there is no actual education and there is no actual experience that you could put on your CV. But I think the most important thing, again, is not the individual itself. It is the system and respecting the system, which means, one, if they are elected, then they should hold office or they should hold a seat in parliament. And number two, there is accountability, whether it is through legal processes or election processes. Maintaining that system, to me, is the foundation of that democracy. And the third thing, I think, is always, why do they go into politics? Is it to become even more famous, or do they have a mission? And that you can only judge after they sit in parliament or office.
Everybody wants to be famous, including each of our countries. Of course, it's a big competition in the world, and now with this shifting we are talking about, the competition becomes even bigger. Why shall we, or the rest of the world, look to Indonesia? Why is Indonesia special comparing with the rest of us?
I always say, the first thing I always say is that Indonesia is the biggest country in the world that that the world knows least about. Number one, we are a country with the fourth largest population, the fourth largest democracy. We are the 14th largest economy in the world. We are a source of major minerals and natural resources. We are at the crossroads of about 60 to 70% of global shipping in the world. Why? Because if you want statistics, within the next half a century, 3 decades or so, we will potentially be one of the top 5 economies in the world. So it is not about being special, but it is about understanding about certain countries which have very strategic positions. Culturally, Indonesians are not people who shout and say, hey, here I am, you know, I am very special. That's not part of our culture. But I think it is important to note and to notice. For Romania, for example, you have a market of 280 million people which you have not tapped. In terms of trade, in terms of commerce, that's a big market. So just look at it from that aspect, I think it's very important to note.
You're ambassador in Romania. Of course, I do have to ask you, what are your goals here? You already mentioned that we don't tap enough of the big market that Indonesia is. What else?
Well, I would first like to say that this year we are celebrating our 75th anniversary of bilateral relations. It may not mean anything, but to us Indonesians it means a lot. The saying is, a friend in need is a friend indeed, and we will never forget Romania's role in recognizing our independence and opening up bilateral relations. That was a very important juncture. It means it's historical, but it means a lot. Relations has gone up and down, as with the times, as with global challenges, as with governments and so on. But I do see that in the last 3 to 4 years, there has been a significant uptick in the relationship. I would look at it 2 ways. You can use statistics, charts, and so on. And if you use that, yes, Indonesia ranks very low with Romania. But the first thing I would look at is the significance, importance of people-to-people relations. You have to remember, my capital, Jakarta, is one of the farthest capitals in the world vis-à-vis Bucharest. I think it's farther than Tokyo, it's farther than Beijing, it's even farther than Washington, D.C. I think Santiago, Chile would be the only thing, and Canberra.
The competition,
and
yes.
Competition. But even then, with that distance, and automatically when you talk about distance, you're talking about money, more or near 50,000 Romanians have visited Indonesia in the last 24 months. I don't have statistics as to where they went, but I can probably guess they all went to Bali, most of them. That shows that Indonesia, and in the case Bali, is very much in the Romanian psyche, at least as a destination. The other thing that I would point out in that respect is we are always very thankful at the support of Romanian government scholarships. Right now, there are more than 2 or 3 dozen Indonesians studying in Romania. And trust me, it will not be your ambassador to Jakarta, but it will be these young Indonesians, when they return, who will become your best envoys and best ambassadors to Romania. There is so much potential that has not been tapped. I understand that, that Romania may have a tendency to look west, to its European partners, and that's very natural. All I'm just saying is that you have a country, 280, nearly 300 million people, the 14th largest economy in the world, that you have not tapped into, and we are very open to that.
Ambassador, thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Atât pentru astăzi, dar rămânem în continuare online pe pagina de Facebook a emisiunii și pe conturile noastre de X și Instagram. Revenim cu subiecte noi din lumea diplomației și a politicii externe, vinerea viitoare de la 11:30 și reluare sâmbătă după miezul nopții. La revedere!